Hello everyone, welcome to Thank God It's Friday. Now, one of the things that I don't think we ever really think about when we think about the Bible is how the New Testament, this book which has literally changed the course of history, how the New Testament begins. Now, of course, it starts with Matthew's Gospel, and chapter 1 of Matthew's Gospel begins in what we can only describe as the most ordinary way possible. It begins with this big, long list of names. The genealogy of Jesus. It goes from Abraham right through to the birth of Jesus. And it's just an incredibly dull way for the book to begin. I think the reason we don't really look at it is for no better reason than it's just really boring. But I want to tell you today, it is incredibly significant. Now, the reason I think it's so important is, of course, it is the way that God has chosen that the New Testament begins. But also, there is something buried within that long list of names that I want us to particularly think about today, for it tells us so much about Jesus himself. Now, there are some odd things about the genealogy. First of all, Matthew makes a big play for the fact that it goes from Abraham, and then there are 14 generations until King David, 14 generations from King David until the exile, and then 14 generations from the exile until the birth of Jesus. Now, the problem is, if you actually look at the number of names, although he makes a big song and dance about it, there aren't 14 generations always. There's at least one missing generation. Also, there aren't enough generations from King David until the exile, and enough generations certainly from the exile until the birth of Jesus to actually have covered that time span. There are clearly people who are the descendants of Jesus who are missing. It also disagrees with Luke's version of the genealogy as well. But putting that all aside, there is then one particular oddity about the genealogy which stands out so much. Now, before I spell it out, the thing we need to know about Matthew's Gospel is it's generally believed he was writing for a particularly Jewish audience. That he seems to be more, of the four Gospels, Matthew seems to have the most Jewish flavour to it. So, of course, a Jewish genealogy would not list anybody other than the men in the family. Of course, it's a patriarchal society, but there, buried within the genealogy of Jesus, it lists 5 women. That in itself is incredibly extraordinary. But then, when we actually look at who those 5 women those 5 women are, well, it just becomes more extraordinary than you could even comprehend. So, let's do just that. So, I've come to this warm and cosy setting to tell you the delightful story of Tamar and Judah, which can be found in Genesis 38. It's a wondrous tale, the sort of tale that I can just see why Tamar is one of the 5 women included in the genealogy, because it's such a warm and lovely tale. Oh no, it's not. It's completely the opposite. It's just scandalous and awful. So, Judah had a son and he married Tamar, but the son died without giving Tamar a child, though therefore the rules of Levirate marriage meant that Tamar would then be married to Judah's next son. That also happened. However, he wasn't a very nice man and wouldn't sleep with her properly, shall we say, and he died also, leaving Tamar childless again. Now, Judah then had another son, and Tamar should have been married to him, but Judah told Tamar to wait until this son was old enough to marry her, so that's what she did. But Judah had no intention, we don't think, of marrying Tamar to his third son. Anyway, as this story develops, one day Judah goes to the place where Tamar lives, the village where Tamar lives, and what she does is she dresses up as a prostitute and she covers her face, and Judah comes across her and he does what happens in such situations, and because he can't actually pay for it, he offers her his cord and his whip as a token, and then he'll send a goat along when he's got chance. So she takes it. Now, later on in this story, Judah finds out that his daughter-in-law Tamar is pregnant, and through prostitution, and so he's going to have her stoned to death. But just before she is stoned to death, she produces Judah's whip and cord and says, "Ta-da! This is the man who is the father of my child." And in a wonderful line in Genesis, Judah then says, "Well, she is more righteous than I." Obviously, it's a bit of a relative term in such context, but this is the wondrous tale, the sort of tale we'd obviously love to tell about. Can you remember what old grandma did? How she seduced grandpa and dressed up as a prostitute. Oh, what a wondrous tale it is. Anyway, this is the first woman named in the genealogy of Jesus. Now, the second woman who is named in the genealogy is Rahab. Now, Rahab's significant for two reasons. One, she was a foreigner. She wasn't part of the Jewish faith. And the second one is, of course, as that she's known in the Bible for being, yes, you guessed it, a prostitute. And of course, she appears in the story where Israel sends spies to oversee the land and to see what's happening, and they end up at Rahab's place, and she takes them in and she hides them and she protects them. And because of that, she's recognised as someone who was looking after the Jews, and her life is then spared when the Jews then overrun that place. So again, it's a puzzle as to why Rahab is one of the 5 women who are named in this genealogy. The third person named in the genealogy is Ruth. And of course, many people love the story of Ruth. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not about to tell you something you don't want to hear about Ruth, about what she might have got up to. However, Ruth's particularly significant because she was a Moabite, and actually in Deuteronomy, the Moabs were condemned by God for at least 10 generations for doing something horrible to the Jews. And Ruth is very much within this 10 generation window, so she's living under a curse. Anyway, of course, she is really kind and generous and looks after Naomi, and they go back to the Jewish homeland, and there she meets Boaz. And Naomi encourages Ruth to be quite proactive, shall we say, in attracting Boaz. And after a day out in the fields collecting corn, they find themselves lying on the threshing floor. And in the Bible it tells us that Ruth uncovered Boaz's feet in the middle of the night, and this of course woke him up, and he said that if there wasn't somebody else who could marry her, that he would marry her. Now, I have to tell you, uncovering his feet is likely to be a euphemism. It probably wasn't his feet that she uncovered. But anyway, that's incidental really to the story. But it's another wonderful chapter in this genealogy. This foreigner woman is the next person named in the history of Jesus. Well, the fourth person is so scandalous a story that she's not actually named. She's just listed as the wife of Uriah. Now, of course, this is Bathsheba. And this is yet another wondrous tale that, of course, people would love to sit around and tell about. Well, can you remember Grandma, how she got together with Grandad when she was on the roof bathing, and David saw her from a distance and thought, yes, I'll have some of that, summoned her over, they slept together, she became pregnant, and of course then King David then tried to trick her husband Uriah into coming back from the battlefield in trying to sleep with her, and so he would think that the baby was his. Now, of course, Uriah was would refuse to sleep with Bathsheba when he returned from the battlefield, because he didn't want to sleep whilst his compatriots were still out at war. And of course, eventually David then sent him off to the front line, where he was guaranteed to be killed, so that he could then take Bathsheba to be his wife and to bring the child into his home and the family. Well, this is yet another wondrous story that's included there in the genealogy of Jesus. Now, the fifth woman, of course, then is the mother of Jesus, Mary. So people have wondered over the years, why on earth are these 5 women named in the genealogy? It's so unusual that they're at all. Now, I think it tells us something just wonderful about the kingdom that Jesus is going to establish. It tells us something wonderful about the mission and the ministry of Jesus that we will see develop over the gospel and onwards. And of course, it says something about how boundaries are being broken down. In this genealogy, the women don't need to be there, but certainly these foreigners, these foreign women who are listed in the genealogy, they have no place in a Jewish genealogy. So why are they there? I think it's because these barriers are being broken down. The kingdom that Jesus comes to establish is for absolutely anyone, male or female, black or white. It doesn't matter who you are, Jesus is for everybody. And then of course there's also something there about the checkered histories of the women who were included in this genealogy. That there are no barriers to anything anyone can have ever done in terms of their past lives, which can stop them from playing a part in God's future. These 4 women who we've mentioned, who are named in the genealogy, well, at least 3 of them have very checkered pasts indeed, but that has not stopped the line of Jesus from developing. God has worked through them in order to reach this place where his mother Mary can then, of course, bring to birth this wondrous child. And I guess that is why I think the genealogy of Jesus, although it's so often ignored, is such a really important part of our Bible. It tells us so much about the coming kingdom and all that it means, that it's open for everybody, and it doesn't matter whatever you've done, nobody is excluded from coming to the love and the grace of Jesus Christ. Amen.